Economic Development Network. We are a national network of several hundred community organizations and individuals working to create local economic opportunities that support an inclusive and sustainable economy. CCEDNet has done a number of webinars like this one in recent years, and all of these recordings are on our website, free for members. So please allow me to welcome you again. And I'm hoping to be able to turn the microphone over to our esteemed guests. I'm just going to check in to see with Matthew if Stuart is all ready to go.
So,
okay.
Dr. Stewart Perry has been long active in community economic development in the US and in Canada as both a policy advisor and a designer and manager of CED institutions. As head of the Center of Community Economic Development in the US, he helped create the first financial institution for CED, the Massachusetts Community Development Finance Authority. He helped start Canada's very first community development corporation, New Dawn Enterprises. It's great to have Rankin also here on the call.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, and in the years 1981 to 1993, he headed the Community Economic Development Center in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. A consultant, researcher, and author, Stewart currently specializes in community and development finance. He is CCEDNet's first honorary lifetime member. So we're very happy to have Stewart here on the call. And this first part of this webinar is really going to be a conversation between Stewart and Victoria Morris. Victoria is the executive director of Saskatchewan's Cooperative Association. With 20 years of experience in community economic development and cooperatives, she has worked in northern, rural, and urban communities in many parts of Canada. Victoria served on CCEDNet's board for 12 years and was a founding member of the Emerging Leaders Committee. So welcome, Victoria and Stewart, and I will pass it over to both of you.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see all your faces and hear your voices. And thank you, Stewart, for being our feature presenter today. So, Stuart, so CED originated in the US in the War on Poverty. And Stuart, you were at the Office of Economic Opportunity near the origins of CED. Can you tell us what was it like then?
Well, my first few days there, it was actually the executive office of the president. And then it became spun off into a separate agency, namely the Office of Economic Opportunity. So what was it like then? It was exciting. My gosh, it was exciting because, well, the particular section that I was in was research and policy development and program development. And so I had the opportunity to think about what should I do? And I came there with the idea, because that was my background from before, of doing something for medical attention for the poor. And I discovered as I was there for just a few days, gosh, I don't have to do anything here. They've already got such wonderful things and interesting things going on here. That isn't anything I can really contribute much on. So what the heck am I going to do? And somehow or another, I discovered with my colleagues that in major American cities, a number of them, there was a community group that was called a Community Development Corporation, and it was a social invention of low-income urban neighborhoods, a social invention that expected to do something to improve the conditions of people in that neighborhood. So having discovered this and trying to find out more about it was my first task, really, at the Office of Economic Opportunity. And Well, actually, we operated this particular interest under the legislative authority of a certain clause in the OEO Act that was developed by Bobby Kennedy and Jake Javits, both senators from the state of New York. I don't know, am I getting into too much detail here about this?
No, I think that was good, and it's like really, for me, it's really interesting to hear that there was that much thought going into the things related to community economic development at the, at the highest levels of the U.S. government. So, and how much you got to contribute to that. So that's, yeah, I think it's really interesting stuff.
Well, Bobby Kennedy and Jake Javits were, as I say, senators from New York. And actually, they had got a little clause in the OEO Act that was specifically to deal with the problems of Bedford-Stuyvesant, which was a really terrible New York City slum. So their original thought about it was that they needed to interest the wealthy and important not people, but organizations like IBM and whatever, to take an interest in this very, very depressed neighborhood. And so they set up a group of very high class people in the big industries and the corporations of New York City to take an interest in this. And it was that particular piece of legislation which we were asked to do something with. That is, it was only for Bed-Stuyvesant. That was all that little piece of the law dealt with. But this was the time in which the whole country was being racked by major riots in the major cities of the country. And the president had set up a council, so to speak, to say, what should we do about this? This is terrible what's going on in all the cities with the burnings and so on and so forth. And so they called over to us and said, what are you going to do about it? So it was up to us to come up with some thing that would deal with the riot situation. And of course, what we said was, well, what you do is you let people decide to, deal with their own futures. And they've invented this thing called the Community Development Corporation, and by golly, isn't that a wonderful thing? And so we were told, well, the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Agriculture, and you are now told to develop something, and we'll decide. The Bureau of the Budget, or people in there, would decide which one of you gets to use all the money and the legislative capacity that is now in the bill. So figure out what to do, and then there'll be a contest, and we'll decide what to do with you. So we said, oh boy, this is easy. I mean, isn't it easy just to say, tell people, you know, you figure out what to do for yourselves. You're the ones who need to make the decisions, not us down here in Washington. And so on the basis of that, we made up a kind of a proposal that said we need to have a CDC program and give money to local organizations in the areas where people had organized themselves. And so the four departments: agriculture, commerce, and us, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and what did I say was the other one? Agriculture, commerce, and
I don't know.
Oh, labor. And so honestly, there was no problem in our getting the go ahead from the president, because the Commerce Department said, oh well, what we do need is loan funds for these neighborhoods, and so we'll set up some loan funds. So they did set up loan funds, and they quickly ran out of money, and nothing much happened. And then the Agriculture Department set up two projects. One was totally black, and the other was white. And, you know, for God's sakes, what are you doing there? And then the Department of Labor set up some programs that gave money to corporations if they would hire poor people. And that didn't work out much either. I mean, they didn't do much hiring, and the ones that they didn't pay much attention to the needs of these people. And so, you know, it was a done deal. I mean, obviously, we were the only ones who really paid attention to what might happen there, and we got the money and the legislative go ahead to deal with this as the major government response to these things that were happening throughout the country. Mm-hmm. Imagine that. I mean, there was no competition. I mean, they were the other departments didn't know what the hell they were doing. So OEO got this CED go ahead, and that's how it started.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. So Stuart, you came to Nova Scotia in the 1970s and helped set up Canada's first community development corporation, New Dawn Enterprises. So do you have a favorite memory from the development of New Dawn?
Well, you know, one of my favorite memories was the fact that the guys and gals who were working to set up New Dawn were led by Greg McLeod, a philosophy professor and a priest, and he was such an inspirer. He could just make people just think that they could really do something, which they could and did. But what was fun about it was, in the early days, these were always meetings that were accompanied by music and lots of drinks and food to eat and fun talking and so on and so forth. I mean, it was almost a social situation that started all this New Dawn up. You know, it was they were really evenings of joy and celebration, and that's how New Dawn really started.
Excellent. So the heyday of CED in Canada was in the late 1990s. So how do you think that CED has changed since then, and what do you see in Canada that's similar to the original motivations, or what do you think is different now?
Well, the truth is, you know, at this juncture, I haven't been very closely connected with CCEDNet, and so I don't really know much intensively of what's been going on. But I get the impression that the concept of a multi-purpose local institution that is concerned with a variety of problems that link into each other in the low-income community is not as significantly regarded today, and that instead what takes people's attention seems to be the creation of specific companies that will hire people and provide a beginning basis of an economic renewal in the neighborhood. So instead of being a complicated multi activity program, it's mostly concerned with social enterprises. And so now I'm saying this without really knowing what is going on, but this is what seems to me to be the case. Now, I'd like to have somebody respond back on that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to give people a chance to jump in a couple minutes. I just have 2 more questions for you, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So kind of building on that, and I think you're right, there is a big transition or focus towards social enterprise. And so knowing what you know and from your experience, what do you think that we need to remember as we look to the next 20 years of this work?
Well, I don't know about remembering. Let's begin with taking a look at what you're doing right now and saying, how is this making a difference? How are the social enterprises really making a difference in the low-income communities? Now, all along the way in CED, there's always been the creation of businesses to hire people and to provide services and goods for the local community. And so this is not anything that's new. It was there all along, but it was only a part of the CDC's activities, not the main concern. So first of all, it seems to me we have to take a look at how is this kind of specialization um, dealing with the problems of poverty and low-income communities. Is this particular program choice really making a difference? And if not, why not? And or if it is, then how do we continue to promote it? So first of all, take a look at what's happening and what changes it has occasioned.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. So, final question before we invite others to share their thoughts. Stuart, do you have, well, I'm sure you have many favorite memories, but do you have a favorite memory of your work or the evolution of CED in Canada over the years?
Well, first of all, Vicki, my favorite memories are of you and others having fun at the annual meetings. You know, we used to have an awful lot of fun after in the evenings and nights of the conference time. Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, well, thank you, Stuart. Yes.
There were about 40 red faces there.
What's that?
So,
I said, Stuart, I think there are about 40 red faces out there smiling.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, well,
Stuart,
the reddest one is right here.
So we have a number of friends and colleagues who want to reflect on their experience working with you and with CCEDNet and CED over the years. So it's a good time to pick up your glasses, folks, as we move into toasts and memories. And we'll try to give as many people as possible opportunity, but we've got a few people scheduled up first. So our first guest would be Rankin McQueen. Rankin, are you ready?
Sure. Boy, it's pretty handsome looking fellows on the screen there now, I'll tell you. Well, look, it's great to be here and to hear everybody, to hear Stuart and to hear some old friends and some new friends. I think when I think of CCEDNet, the beginning of CCEDNet, I think of the gathering in Guelph at the monastery. And,
yeah.
And certainly, I think I certainly knew. Obviously, I knew Stuart long before. I'd known Mike Lois. I knew Paul Boren. I knew Dell, and some others. But when we began to come together in Guelph, there were a number of new people to me. When I look back at that, I mean, I think the role that Stuart played for me, I mean, in any group like that, I mean, in many ways, it's like a class, a senior university class for me, where you're really trying to probe and ponder the next steps. And in many ways, Stuart always had that in a very gentle way, was really kind of the facilitator of that, the academic thought leader, facilitator. And Stuart always had this ability to kind of say the difficult thing, speak to some uncomfortable truth that needed to be spoken to, which would kind of like make me stand up and come to attention and reconsider things. Yeah, so those are wonderful memories. I think one of the things about those sessions for me in Guelph was that we were quite audacious. like there was a sense that we could do this. There was no money. There was really no plan at that point in time. It was just a concept, but it was a wonderful group for me to be witness to and to experience the confidence of that assembly. I mean, I think there were a lot of things that, and I won't speak for the rest, but a lot of things when I look back, I'm amazed at what I missed or what I wasn't aware of at that time. One is, I mean, I think there were a lot more men around that table than there were women. Probably if I walked into that room today, I'd be shocked how imbalanced it was. I mean, there were some outstanding, strong women like Flo and Eunice and Carol. But my memory is we were mostly men. And secondly, I think I was quite unaware. I didn't appreciate the whole First Nations issue like I do now. I hope I appreciate it better. And the force, the lovely force it is becoming. And then certainly I think the whole climate issue. Back 20 years ago, I wasn't on the ball there at all. But one of the things I felt confident about, and I still feel confident about, and I think that group was confident about, there was this understanding that in large measure, communities had to find a way to take charge of themselves to solve the really complicated, difficult problems. I want to pick up on Stuart's comment about, to close with, I want to pick up on Stuart's comment about having fun. My memory of Guelph too is at the end of the day, it was great fun. And there was a sense of community, a really strong sense of community. And we'd go out in the back of that monastery and you'd smell the tobacco. They were manufacturing tobacco. And I think some of us were pretty keen to smoke cigarettes in those days and drink scotch. And we'd laugh. I mean, I just remember laughing in this wonderful company. Yeah, so it was for me the privilege to be there. And it was, as always, it's kind of been this ongoing honor of my life. And that was another instance of it for me, to be witness and to experience Stuart's leadership. So I say to Stuart, cheers, and thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
I'd like to make a comment on one observation that you made. And that was the fact that even though we had some really strong women as a part of the picture, it was a male operation. And I remember one time at one of these meetings, the group decided that we go around the table and just people would say something about what they were doing and sort of introduce themselves. And there was mostly men there in the circle. And so each one of us males made a comment or set of comments about our organization and what we were doing and so on and so forth. And finally it came to Carol, and she said, you know, I really don't think this is helpful, or words to that effect. She says, you know, it seems like everybody's simply saying mine's bigger than yours. Mine's longer than yours. You get the point?
Yes.
and the room broke up in laughter. Of course it did. Of course it did. And of course, Carol was pointing out that there was a lot of bragging going on rather than simply exchange of information. And I don't think anybody ever forgot that occasion and Carol's comments about it, and learned from it that the whole point is, how can we learn from each other rather than how can we simply make a picture of what we're doing.
Indeed. Well, speaking of someone with fabulous laughter, our next guest is Mike Lewis. Mike, are you ready?
Mike.
Uh-oh.
Mikey.
All right. Snooze, you lose, Mike. Are you there? Are you there? All right. Well, Mike, if you come back on the line. Oh, you're there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
What were you doing?
I just had my mute on and I forgot. I got so excited by what Rankin said about, yeah, I could hardly wait to start. I forgot to turn it on. So, well, great. Really happy to be here as part of the toasting crowd. My first encounter with Stuart was long distance. The Cape Breton Community Economic Development Network that he was heading up at that time. He published a newsletter, which I waited for eagerly every quarter. And so that was my encounter from a distance. And my first in-person encounter was in 1989 in Chicago. I had organized a group of 25 people from across Canada to come to the National Economic Development Law Center Conference in Chicago, which was celebrating the 25th anniversary of the War on Poverty, which Stuart mentioned earlier as his kind of beginning point in this field. In any case, I wanted to have people engage each other around mapping what was going on in CED in the country and begin just to kind of explore whether the whole idea of a national network in Canada was something that people wanted to think about together. And of course, Stuart was absolutely on the top of my list in terms of people I wanted to come to that meeting. And I think I knew Don was there, the chair of the board, and Nancy Neamton was there. I think Dal, you were there, I think, too, as well. And anyway, I finally got to meet him in person, and I was in the hall before the conference started, and I shook his hand, and I was just about trying to say hello, and Stuart got mobbed. As people saw him in the foyer, they just came up, and Stuart. Well, honest to God, I mean, he got taken over, and the next time I saw him was up on the stage. Nobody knew he was coming. He was up on the stage doing the opening keynote for a conference of 800 people. So that was kind of interesting and puts in context how the stories of the beginnings in the United States and the role he played. In 1991, we really got to be working closely together. I'd organized a national project to research urban CED in Canada. That's where I learned about people like the Learning Enrichment Foundation and the organization Paul had at the time in Waterloo. And anyway, I organized that, and it was a partnership between our organization and an organization Nancy had started in Quebec. And the whole idea was that we would do the research on urban CED in Canada. We'd use it as a networking device. And, you know, it kind of came out of the Chicago meeting. That was the first opportunity to really see if we could move things to the next step. And of course, Stuart was there. He was central to doing the research. He was central to subsequent writing, which included a major report and also a book that he and I wrote at the time called Reinventing the Local Economy. So I'm telling you this because I want you to see that Stuart was involved at every stage of the evolution long before we ever met in Guelph. What emerged out of that, and National Health and Welfare had funded that research, they organized a symposium as a follow-on. And people wrote papers. I told them some people to get to write papers, and then people were coming to be there. And we had, we had New Dawn there. We had a number of different groups that ended up becoming part of the formation process, CCEDNet, many years later. In any case, as there, we actually at that meeting organized for people to meet, and we talked about the national network. That was back in 1994. And then people like Paul and others started, they came around a common table with our organization. We called it a National Policy Advisory Group, and we responded to the invitation to comment on the National Welfare Reform Program that Lloyd Axworthy was putting up. And we needed a device to get people around the same table, the hypothesis being, I think Stuart and I, that this could create the basis for the core of leadership that might put the network together. In any case, we did that, and there was parliamentary hearings as well, and we organized around that. I remember Rankin and his team made a really dramatic testimony to the parliamentary committee in Cape Breton when they came there. Anyway, so, all of this then led finally to the meetings in Guelph that Rankin was talking about. And of course, Stuart was part of that process. And the major first project that came out of that in 1990 or 2001, we organized for a year and a half, essentially to put the national policy framework together. A number of the people here, Dal, Gary online, helped write a very first draft, and then we dressed it up with some help from Stuart, and it went out across the country. There was 5 regional consultations, and then it came back, and we had a major national conference around the draft and had debates, and a number of people here were at that conference, and that really was formative for us. And so Stuart was key in all parts of that process, as helping draft, giving advice, participating in the debates. And so it's little wonder, in my view, that people at the time decided to recognize Stuart as first honorary member of CCEDNet. And I think I probably am close to having gone through my time. He and I have worked very closely ever since. Just one last story. I headed up a group called the BC Alberta Social Economy Research Alliance as the lead investigator. And this, of course, came out of CCEDNet and the Quebec groups working together around lobbying Paul Martin based on the policy framework. And in any case, Stuart was part of that BC Alberta Social Economy Research Alliance, and for 8 years. And at year 6, when we were applying for another project, he was in his mid-80s at that time, and I told another Stuart, who was the manager for the network, for the coalition, I said, I don't know whether Stuart really will, I don't know, should we have him on the list? Should we put it out to him? He says, oh yeah, we should put him out. Put out the invitation to him and join again for this next project. And I thought, okay. And I think all of you can guess probably what he replied. Well, of course I want to be involved. What do you think? I'm getting old or what? Anyway, toast to Stuart.
Stuart.
And I'm drinking wine and it's only 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Our next guest is Paul Bourne. Paul, are you on the line?
I am.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Matter of fact, I gave up a meeting with Carol Rock to be at this gathering, and I told her about it. I hope Carol's on the line joining us because it was exciting for her. And I lovely. I've been seeing all of your pictures and, Rankin, we've got the Michael and Flo and Dal and Gary and Peter. And Jeff, Patel, Walter, and of course, who's not with us is Eunice, who passed away, and she was a big part of the beginning. Lovely to be on the call, and all these lovely memories of this time. I know that, you know, I have this distinction. Gary Lowen is on this call, and he was our first executive director. I chaired the board for 2 years, and I'm glad my hair finally grew back, because I pulled most of it out during those 2 years. That was one heck of a group to keep together. And, you know, want to recognize the McConnell family, because they're the ones who paid all of our travel bills during those years, and the priests at Loyola, you know, who didn't just give us a good rate for sleeping over there, but they also prayed for us and wished the best on us. So lots of people founding us. We misstepped so many times those early years. But I am so proud of everyone that stayed involved, and Michael Toy for your resilience over the last half decade or more now, as you've pulled things together and really brought the organization to new heights. Congratulations to everyone. My memory of Stuart, you know, we were always trying to learn at it was called the Community Opportunities Development Association, and we're always trying to learn. And so when I heard about Stuart, Mike Lewis had introduced me to him, and Rankin had told me all about him, and so I wanted to get to know Stuart and take his wisdom and see whether it could be applied to our organization, our community economic development organization. Could we do more? So I picked up Stuart and brought him to our office, and came into my office. The meeting was supposed to start, and Stuart looked over to me and he said, I need to go to the bathroom. I said, oh, okay, sure. Do you want me to show you? Oh, no, I'll find it. No problem. Well, I sat there in my office for over half an hour waiting for Stuart to come back. And I was thinking to myself, you know, Stuart's a pretty bright guy, and I mean, it's a big office, but it shouldn't be taking him this long to get back here. So I went looking for Stuart, and where did I find him? I found him in the staff room, and he was looking at the bulletin board, and he was dissecting all the messages that were in there. And I asked him, Stuart, what you doing? He said, well, Paul, he said, whenever I come to a new place, I like to look around. I walk the aisles, I look at all the bulletin boards, and I try to understand what's really going on. I said, oh. He said, well, I know I said I was going to the bathroom, but I need to let you know that this technique I use, it's called the Perry P-test. So he tells me he's going peeing, but actually what he's doing is observing. And I never forgot that. And Stuart, that taught me more in that moment, and it shaped the rest of my career. This deep understanding that before you act, before you give any sense of wisdom to anyone, observe. Go and look everywhere. Read every bulletin board. And I have been in hundreds and hundreds of communities since then, and that becomes my my first thing I do. And I always call it, and I actually tell people, I probably told hundreds of people this story about the Perry P-test and how important it is in how we understand the community part of community economic development. So just thanks everyone for being on the call. You know, I particularly learned so much from you in all those years. I so enjoyed that time at Loyola House and all those gatherings we had. Rankin for all your stories, Mike Lewis for your passion, your drive, and your sense that we could make all of this happen. Flo for your wry sense of humor, and somehow you were always the mediator in the group. Gary, you had a tremendous sense of wisdom, and you're always one who brought business knowledge to us. And we were so grateful of that from your experience at Air Canada, but you were so dedicated to it all. Peter Frampton, you and Eunice, what a pair. And the Learning Enrichment Foundation was such an inspiration to us. Of course, Walter and now Jeff at Momentum, for all that you've done in shaping this field in such a really amazing way. And of course, Carol Rock with RED, Women in Rural Economic Development, really bringing the strong women's voice to this work, which was so needed at that time and even more now. So I know there's some of you I've missed, but truly, thank you. You shaped my life and you shaped the field, and you've made you've made Canada better because you exist. That's all I gotta say.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
First of all, I think it's great that Paul was able to pinpoint a lot of the people who have been so important in this whole enterprise, and how much fun it has been, both in the ordinary sense and in an intellectual sense, to be with them and to hear what their comments and impressions are in different kinds of problematic situations. But one thing I need to expand on what Paul said about the Perry P test. It really is a little bit more pointed. I do take a look at the bathroom in an organization.
How clean
That's
it is.
why
Right.
That's why I call it the P test, because I go to pee and I look at the bathroom and see what it's like, and you can tell something about an organization as to what the condition of the bathroom is. It's amazing sometimes. The bathroom is not in good condition, and when you see a bathroom that is not in good condition, you know you have an organization that is not in good condition. But you see a bathroom in very good condition, and you know that's this organization too. So that's the Perry P test too.
Very good.
Excellent. Thanks,
Ours
Stuart.
was only in medium condition, Stuart. That's why we needed your help.
Thank you, Paul. So just a note for folks, we did get started a little bit late, and so we will be able to keep going. So don't worry if you do need to leave. Thanks for joining, but we will keep the conversation going a little bit. So our next guest is Flo Frank. Flo, are you ready?
Oh, you betcha. Listen, thank you so very much. I'm honored to be part of, first of all, of the whole CED movement network, all of that, but this call in particular, and because of the patchwork quilt we're making here of stories and memories, I'm really very, very flattered to be part of this group of four of us who can try to capture little bits and pieces. I'd like to start by saying, I don't know whether you have a photo in front of you that I sent this morning, but Stuart, I'm looking at one that I don't know if you'll remember it. You're wearing a wedding veil, and I have a tiara on my head and a green boa and some pink sunglasses. And, you know, I can't honestly say when or where it was because it happens so often. So I'm looking at that and smiling. So it's with that backdrop that the few words that I'd like to say are, they're held with that image of you in mind. You have a big grin on your face and your arms around me, and it reminds me of not just how much fun we've had over the years, but that we were able and willing to do it, to take the opportunity to play, not just work. So I want to thank you for that. You know, we talked about the network in terms of some of the history, and thanks very much, you know, for sharing all of that, Rankin and Paul and Mike. And You know, we talk about the birth of the network, and I always hold dear to my heart, because Stuart, this is where your name first came to me, is not the birth of the network, but the conception of it. And like most conceptions, it actually happened with adult beverages occurring in a bar in Ottawa, where a very few of us were saying, well, you know, it's time. And no, you were right, Rang. We didn't have any money. We didn't have a plan. We just thought that, you know, it was time. And we put our money down and made it all happen. And when we were doing this, just before the flights were called, Mike Lewis mentioned your name, Stuart, that you would be somebody that just absolutely would be helpful and useful, and wouldn't that be great? And we wound up having the meetings that people have talked about to help set the network up. Now, funnily enough, aside from this photo that I'm looking at, it just happens that at this moment I'm relocating my home and office. And, you know, I still carry a lot of paper files around me, and I was smiling because I knew this call was coming today, and I had a great big fat old CCEDNet file in there. And I took a little look. One of the things that I do when I'm in meetings, and, you know, we all jot things down. Well, I was making notes about the people around the table. And this was, you know, at the monastery, and, you know, there were various folks there, and I sort of writing down comments about them, I guess in part strategically thinking about, you know, where and how I would fit in it or others. And Stuart, one of them had your name on it. It was spelled incorrectly, which was because I don't think I'd ever really seen your name written out. So it was written, and you know what it had on it? There was your name and these words. I jotted them down, and I've got it in front of me right now. Smart, thoughtful, experienced, fair, encouraging, and then in a different pen later on, there was a note, classy and energetic. And I thought about that. And I thought about you. Yeah, that was right. Bang on the numbers, right? First meeting. So I want to thank you for all of those attributes that you so generously bring and share with all of us. And to just say, you know, not only do I, you know, kind of admire all the work that we've all done, and to the degree that you've helped too, Stuart, but geez, I like you. You're just a stand-up character, and I like you very much. And in the coming years, I guess when I take a look at the future, you know, I jotted a few little notes down, and my best memory and what the future holds are kind of tied together. And Stuart, it was when we started with the emerging leaders. And I can't remember all of them who were there, but I know that Victoria Morris and Shauna Lukowski were there. Victoria, did we bring anyone else? Or was it just the two of you from our little group?
To the Stewart party or to a meeting?
Oh, well, it was the first one that you two had come to, and we were to have all brought the next practitioners coming through. And what I remember,
yeah.
Was that, Victoria?
Yeah, there were a few, and yeah, Shauna and I think organized the workshop, but yeah, there was others around.
Yeah, and there they were, young and bright-eyed and not sure what to make of this group of people who were fairly well established. And Stuart, what I remember is how incredibly welcoming you were, and how you put in extra time and effort and energy with those young folks. I learned from that. I think that the network benefited from them feeling welcome, obviously. They're still there, liking that a great deal. So I think if I had to count my memories, it'd be the fun we had, but also the incredible way that you had encouraged those who were perhaps on the fringes to step up and be part of it. So I thank you for that, and for all of the work that we do. I want to just end with this thought that the kind of poverty that we have been looking at, poor types of communities, Stuart, that you talked about, in Canada and around the world, they're changing so much because of cultural diversity. Indigenous folks moving into urban areas, and folks from newcomers to Canada and across are now living in similar communities. My work for the past 6 years has been around that dynamic, and whether it's going to be poverty or wealth of cultures and diversity, I think remains one of our biggest challenges in the next few years. And I'm delighted that the network and that the country and the world has the capable people in it that are on this call today and who have been doing the work for the past 20 years. So with that, Stuart, a toast to the past, to the present, and to the future, and to all of the contributions that you've made in your incredibly encouraging, experienced, thoughtful, fair, and classy way. So here's to you and here's to us.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I'm glad this is, I'm on a telephone and not on any kind of video, because I would prefer not to be seen as so moved by the comments that everybody has been making. We are a group. That's the point. It's everybody learns off of each other, bounces off of each other, and that's what has made us as strong as we are.
Well said, Stuart. Thank you, Flo. And Matthew, I think I'm turning it back over to you now to commandeer the rest of the call.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not very good at commandeering, but it is time to open the floor for others who might want to make a toast. If you'd like to make a toast, just because there's quite a number of us on the call here, maybe for those of you who are in the Zoom webinar room, you can just type a comment in the chat box that you'd like to speak so that I can prioritize accordingly. And while folks are doing that, I have a few messages to impart from folks who couldn't make it on the call but wanted to share a few things. So the first one is from Ted Jackson. For those who don't know Ted, he's formerly the co-founder and principal of the CCED Technical Assistance Program that was at Carleton University, and presently is the president of E.T. Jackson and Associates and senior research fellow with the Carleton Center for Community Innovation. And he wrote to us to say, "I'm remembering remarkable leaders from the early years, probably too many to mention, but some of them include the late Greg McLeod, Rankin McSween, Tim Broadhead, Dal Broadhead, Gary Lowen, Diana Jeddick, Paul Bourne, Kathy Lang, Rosalind Lockyer, Nancy Neemtan, and Mike Lewis. In our CEDTAP project, that's the CCED Technical Assistance Program project at Carleton, Barbara Levine and Jack Carrier were key players in coordinating with and supporting CEDNet's activities. One early academic, the late Catherine Pearson at the McConnell Foundation, played a key role as well. Jack Corder is very ill now and should be recognized as well. I know there are many others who should be toasted. Cheers, Ted." So I'll raise my glass as others can as well. I'm just drinking water. So. Oh, I like that. Raising the phone cup wine glass. I like that. Thanks, Farah. Walter's typed into the chat box here. Do you want me to say this on your behalf, Walter? Walter says, "Thank you, Stuart, for living out your gentleness, as Rankin has pointed out, and thank you, Rankin, for mentioning climate change. You are now thinking about 20 years ago. It shows us all the courage you have that is so critical for the global community." Hear, hear. Feel free to share again in the chat box, and I'll read aloud for you, or if you wanted to speak yourself, just mention that in the chat box, and be happy to pass the mic, so to speak. Someone else who also wrote in was David Pell. For those of you who don't know David, he co-authored one of the first Canadian books on community economic development called Community Profit, and was CEO of the Community Business Resource Center, the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, and Street Kids International before starting his own private consulting practice. And he wrote, "I'm very pleased to see CCEDNet will celebrate its 20th anniversary this year. I was the first chair of CCEDNet and have followed the organization's impressive history. Congratulations. More important, I would like to share a small part of Stuart's history that affected me and my partner, Susan Weismer. When Susan and I were conducting research for our book, Community Profit, in 1981, Stuart not only agreed to meet with us, but provided an unsolicited financial contribution. His gesture provided encouragement and affirmed that we were engaged in an important project. This is Stuart, able to see the big picture and enabling others to pursue their goals. I continue to be appreciative. Best regards, David." I got a few comments here in the chat box here. Oh, great. I see that Dal is on the line, and I know, Dal, you wanted to say a few words yourself. Do you want to say a few words now?
Yeah, that would be terrific. Can you hear me?
Yes, fantastic.
Great. I like others, particularly of the ancient variety, are thrilled to hear and have Stuart on the line and to hear a brief review of the history. I want to mention another side of Stuart, which was that he was very facilitative, but he was also very tough. Having been at the other end of a number of discussions, it's important to underline that, because that was part of the value of what he did. He did move us along, but if we got cornered, or he would put us on the hook and not take us off until the stuff was sorted out. I remember particularly because Flo and I were a bit the outliers, since at that point we were both running our own firms. So although we'd come out of the not-for-profit sector, we had a slightly different perception, and that caused some pretty active discussions. But they were very helpful discussions, and consistently moved us along. So thank you for that, Stuart. I guess the other thing I wanted to say was that I too, as Gary did, I think, I want to congratulate Mike and others who've stuck with it in CCEDNet over time. I know it's been tough. My daughter was involved, Farah was involved for a while, and I think what was probably the heyday in the sense of a lot of money, but continuing on now and watching the work that's going on across the country. If there's any legacy of us old guys, it's that we at least had enough energy to get something started. Our core belief was actually that communities could do something for themselves with a little bit of an assist. And that was, I think, the synergy of our meetings. And I guess the other belief was you needed to have fun while doing that, because it was really, really tough work. And so I just would like to congratulate the present crew, and say hello to all my pals, many of whom I haven't seen in a while. So thank you for the opportunity. And Stuart, it's great to hear your voice. Cheers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dal. And cheers. I got a couple of comments in the chat box that I'll share aloud, just because I know, Stuart, you're not able to see them, and I'd like to make sure that you do. One from Atel. We are a group, a family. I learned so much from you, Stuart, and many people online. I learned to speak English. Stuart translated me once in a while. And he was understanding my funny way to say things in English. Thanks for your wisdom, and thanks CCEDNet for this opportunity to see everyone. At CCEDNet, we were and still are connecting the dots. Oh, thanks for that, Atel. Also a comment here from Hazel Corcoran. Thanks for this wonderful webinar and for all the history. I would like to also toast Walter Hossley, whom by coincidence and synchronicity in the late 1990s, when CCEDNet was being created, lived down the block from me in Calgary. And for his early, very visionary work in the formation of CCEDNet and Momentum, which continues. Also, he was the best gardener I've ever known. We called his yard the Garden of Eden. So thank you, CCEDNet, and thank you, Walter. And a short note here from Rupert. Thanks everyone. Very cool tribute to our compadre, Stuart. We will keep up the struggle. Great to see some of CCEDNet's emerging leaders on the call. For example, Farah and Victoria. Keep up the struggle. That's great. I got one more comment here I'd like to share as well from Mark Sabai from Tamarack, and then I'll pass the mic over to Michael Toy, who has a few things to share as well. So Mark wrote, I had the privilege of being involved in CCEDNet in a variety of ways. I was active in a stewardship role. I played a small part in the startup phase of the organization when it was informally called the Digby Network in the mid-1990s, and was executive director for a brief period in the year 2000. Sat on the board and chaired the Practitioner Development Committee and assisted the staff and board with strategic planning as a volunteer. I was also involved as a grassroots member, sitting in on workshops, reading newsletters, networking with members, attending AGMs, and listening to webinars. I share all of this only to demonstrate how meaningful the organization has been to me. While I am no longer involved in work that puts me into contact with the CED world, I still follow the work of CCEDNet's leadership and members with great interest. The deep desire of the early members was to connect and strengthen the capacity CED practitioners and organizations from across the countries so that they build strong communities. It's gratifying to see an organization so wildly successful in its mission. Happy 20th CCEDNet, and what a ride. So I pass the mic now to Mike himself.
Mike Toy, thanks, Matthew, and hi, everyone. I first want to start with some greetings from Bill Ninix, who really wanted to be here today as well in Victoriaville. As you know, he's used to overcoming barriers, and there's not much that would slow him down, but he's actually in the hospital right now with an infection that he's battling. And just this morning, he sent me another email saying, Ed, I can't be on the webinar, but please say hello. And so he did want to be here and pass on a big hello to everyone, and he sends his best wishes. So in terms of, I just want to also participate in the toast to Stuart and everyone who's gotten us here after to a 20th anniversary. But what I think I remember most about my first interactions with Stuart were, of course, as have been mentioned a few times, the gatherings in his hotel room at the national conferences. I think I missed the first few of those because I was involved in actually organizing those conferences and was kind of focused on the work rather than the fun. And I've learned over the years that there needs to be more balance in that. But when I did finally manage to make it to those hotel room gatherings, I witnessed the magic of the community building that goes on that I think is really what makes community economic development different and special. The creation of those connections and the links in communities, and that we're able to bring to, and those most skilled at it among us are able to bring to the network and the connections that we build into a movement. And so that the music, the food, the drinks, the whiskey, which I do blame Stuart for having introduced me to, I think is really part of, I remember one of those hotel room gatherings, and Stuart was explaining to me once again, what CED means and what it represents. And the words he used were, it's about the round of life, right? It's about a complete and fulfilling life for all people. And I think that caring for people, that sense of building community, definitely challenging each other, as Dal, you mentioned, but ultimately, I think caring for each other is really what I learned from Stuart. And later on, when it came time, CCEDNet was hiring an ED, and I was thinking of applying, and one of the people I asked was Stewart Perry, and he said, of course you should apply. That was a good idea. And so, well, here we are now. So thank you for that opportunity to have been where I've been through this process and to it's been a real privilege to have been part of the community that we are and the future that we have together. So thank you to Stuart for the inspiration, for being who you are. And thank you to everyone. Okay, no, wait, I have one more thing I want to say. Just that as we look towards the future now, the next 20 years, we obviously have to evolve. And I think there's been good reflections on what was missing 20 years ago and how things are different now. And we are evolving together as a learning community. But one thing I think has been stable, and if you look at the values on CCEDNet's website, and you compare those to the values that were along the bottom of the first brochure of the Digby network, right? Inclusion, diversity, those actually I don't think have changed at all, right? Entrepreneurship, innovation. So I think those values are perennial and can continue to guide the responses we have to the inequality, the injustice, the poverty that we want to overcome. So thank you, Stuart. Thank you to everyone. And here's to the next 20 years. Thank you.
Let me thank everybody for what they contributed.
Well, many thanks to you, Stuart. It's clear the impact that you've had on so many people's lives, and it extends well beyond just the group of people who have been able to join us on this webinar today. So many thanks again, Stuart, and thank you, Victoria, and everyone who's contributed to this call today for helping us to have this time to reflect and share things that we have been able to accomplish over this period of time, and it's easy to always have your focus on the next accomplishments that are ahead of us, because there's certainly no end to the work that needs to be done. But to be able to step back and celebrate is, I think, so important. So. For everyone on the call today, if you'd like to stay in touch and engage in other topics related to today's call, check out our website. Everyone should have received an evaluation survey by now. Really, it's just a way, it's 1 minute, won't take much time at all. But if you can just fill that out, provide any input you have on where we can go with future webinars. Certainly we have many planned that will be more forward-looking moving forward, but we're looking for your ideas. I'll also be following up with everyone with the recording from today's webinar. So if you'd like to relive this wonderful experience today, you'll be able to do that. And you can also share with others who weren't able to be here today. So thanks again, everyone. Any final words, Stuart, that you'd like to share before we close out the call?
There's so much, so much I would like to say that it's that we've been together and we've accomplished things together, and we'll continue to accomplish things together. And thank you so much for your friendliness and appreciation. I am 90 years old at this juncture, and in a few months we'll be 91. And I can't imagine a more terrific birthday present. Thanks so much to all of you.
I think we should sing happy birthday to Stuart. You ready?
No.
Birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy
birthday,
dear Stuart.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
We're glad you were born, Stuart.
Okay.
Ah,
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Alright.
Edna.
Bye, Stuart. We love you.
Yeah, love
Love
you a
you
lot.
all.
Glad you were born. And thank you very much for all the organizing to get this webinar together. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Au revoir.
Take
Bye.
care, everyone.